Oh, now this should be fun. A nice little roast where we poke fun at literally every single model of Royal Enfield ever made. Seriously, every single bike on this list is an Enfield. Actually, it's the exact opposite. And since we're dunking on some truly awful bikes, it would have been all too easy to turn this into another Royal Enfield hit job, so we decided to leave them off the list. Plus, we all know Enfield bad already. Instead, we're looking at some of the most badly designed, ugliest, or slow bikes ever released from the factories. Some of the bikes on today's list are decent, but don't know what they're meant to do. Some of them are bad at the thing they were meant to do, and some of them are so boring as to not elicit a single emotion when you ride them. If you own one of these bikes, I apologize, but I'm not going to hold back. But what I am going to do is tell you what bike you should be getting instead. We've got a lot of bikes to dunk on today, so let's get started. Number 10, the Harley Davidson Street Rod. This was Harley's ill-fated attempt to make a naked/sport cruiser thing. The only problem is that it's one of the most badly designed motorcycles of the last decade, and I'm not just saying that because it's a Harley. Let's start with the engine, probably the best thing about the bike. It's a 749cc liquid-cooled V-twin putting on 47 foot-pounds of torque and about 70 horsepower, which is not bad for their first bat in the 650-ish cc range. Don't think about the fact that it's literally 100 cc's bigger though. It's a pretty zesty engine that likes to rev out, and it makes a good sound once you put a pipe on it, but that's where the good stuff ends. They use the same exhaust pipe from the Street 750, which is designed as a cruiser, so running the exhaust pipe directly under the foot of the rider isn't a big deal, but on a sporty motorcycle, that's kinda dumb. In order for it not to limit ground clearance on the right side, the pipe is very high on the bike, which pushes the foot pegs even higher. Since it was based on a cruiser, it has mid-mounted pegs and a wide flat tank, none of which is good for sporty riding. But hey, they put 17s on the bike, so baby steps. If you want a sporty cruiser, get the Sportster Roadster or Yamaha Bolt R-Spec, both which has more street cred in the Harley groups. Number 9, and sticking with Harley, is the pre-1991 Sportster Iron 883. Why? Because it was a bike on modern American highways that only had 4 speeds in the transmission. So that means that the bike was pushing 50 horsepower and had only 4 gears to get to 80 miles per hour. If you ride a modern 883 and think that vibrates a lot, spending 20 minutes on the highway on a hard-mounted Sportster at 5,000 RPM will honestly have you pining for the comfort of a car. I'll tell you what though, for a girl's bike, that'll put some hair on your chest. If you want a Sportster, get a rubber-mounted one post-2004. Speaking of which, did you have a moment to hear about our Lord and Savior, the Lawnmower 3.0? Was the last entry on the list just a long segue into this ad? Who knows, but after you get done riding that Sportster and you need to shave off all that grizzled Harley pirate hair, there's nothing better than the lawnmower. That's right, a ball shaver first and foremost. Manscaped's got you covered, but that doesn't mean you only use it on your testicles. Your chest pubes, armpit pubes, and any other pubes you might have will get chopped off in seconds. If you want to get the lawnmower, why not get everything Manscaped has to offer in one big old box of goodies? The perfect package is the world's best ball shaver, the world's best nose hair trimmer, the world's best nail trimmers, and the world's best ball toners, deodorants, and cologne. It's literally the greatest thing on the planet, and it can be yours if you click the link down below. Yeah, that's right, you don't even need to put the discount code in. You get 20% off just by clicking the link. Isn't that smart? Thanks to Manscaped for supporting today's video. Now let's keep it rolling. Next up, we've got one bike that everyone can agree on, and it's the Benelli TNT Cafe Racer. A bike so bad that even the motorcycle magazine said it was bad. You see, when most motorcycle reviewers say something like, reliability on this motorcycle has occasionally been an issue, and then give it 3 stars, that's industry speak for this is a flaming hunk of garbage that isn't even worth the weight it scrap metals in. We're going to talk about the looks in a second, but let's get some specs on this turd. Its 1133cc triple makes 135 horsepower and 81 foot-pounds of torques, and the bike weighs in at 474 pounds. That's as good as discount superbikes get, unfortunately. In that weight class, you're playing with the big kids, but we all know that they suck, so let's make fun of how ugly the Benelli TNT is. This is Benelli's Cafe Racer, but what they really made was the B-King you have at home. They side-mounted the radiators basically right where your knees are, because who needs working knees, and then use some goofy looking half tube steel, half aluminum frame, which looks like what a normie thinks a sport bike would look like. It's even got an Undertale Termignoni exhaust for some reason, and large dollops of carbon fiber sprinkled throughout. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't look like a cafe racer. Toss this one in the dumpster, get a Ducati Monster instead, and let's keep it moving. Number 7 goes to the Gen 4 Kawasaki Ninja 250, the world's worst and best and worst beginner bike, other than the Gixxer 250, of course. In 2008, Kawasaki decided to update their practically ancient baby 250 for the first time in over 20 years. Essentially, they took the same old carbureted 249cc parallel twin in the same frame and wrapped it in current trendy plastics. Despite being a largely cosmetic update, they managed to lose between 1 and 5 horsepower and added 22 pounds to the bike. The crazy thing is that while even Harley Davidson had ditched carbs, Kawasaki's bean counters decided that only the Brazilian, European, and Thai bikes would get fuel injection. This is what happens when you're on top for too long. You get lazy and decide that you don't have to compete. Thankfully, nowadays you have a plethora of beginner sport bikes to choose from, and even if you don't have 2 pennies to rub together, you can get something better, like a Gixxer 250. Number 6, and something out of left field, is the BMW R1200C. This bike was more or less the result of BMW looking at Harley and saying to the world, "I'll have one Scrooge McDuck money pile, please." The funny thing is that while the bike is beyond ugly, it was actually a solid bike. It had an 1170cc boxer engine putting down 61 horsepower, which isn't great, but it did have 72 foot-pounds of torque on tap, as low as 3,000 RPM. It wasn't the fastest thing in a straight line, but it wasn't meant to go straight. It handled really well in the corners, it was super reliable, and it was low maintenance thanks to the shaft drive. The thing is that people did not care. American cruiser riders didn't think it was worth trading in their Harley do-rags from BMW Motorrad baseball caps, and they still don't. Time will tell if the R18, which is BMW's latest stab at the American cruiser market, will flop as hard as the R1200C. If you want a BMW cruiser, just grab an R9T. Yes, that's not strictly a cruiser, but it's basically better in every way. Speaking of modern classics, number 5 goes to the Yamaha SCR 950, perhaps the worst factory scrambler ever made. The Yamaha Bolt is a great cruiser and the go-to choice for wannabe Sportster bros on a budget. It's got an air-cooled 942cc V-twin putting down 59 foot-pounds of torque and similar horsepower number, and it weighs in at 545 pounds. So it's literally a Sportster. But some egghead over at Yamaha thought it would be a great idea to slap some spoke wheels on and a flat seat in a cynical attempt to capitalize on the hipster apocalypse of the 2010s. On the street, it was fine. Again, it's basically a Sportster but made from Japan. It goes, it stops, it turns. However, when the road ends and you wanted to break the back tire loose off-road, the SCR 950 is about the worst thing out there since some bonehead decided to chuck a Goldwing off-road. It's heavy and the engine is lazy, and on anything more technical than a fire road, it completely falls apart. As a tribute to the old scramblers like the stripped-down Bonnies or Harleys from the 50s or 60s, it looks the part, but that's kind of it. A Ducati Scrambler is better, a Triumph Bonneville Street Scrambler is better, and a Svartpillen 401 is probably better as well. Number 4, it's the Honda DN01, an anime motorcycle come to life. It looks kinda cool, like a sport bike with ape hangers and floorboards if that bike was crossbred with a scooter. It's got a 680cc V-twin putting down 61 horsepower and 47 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't terrible, but it was heavy at around 540 pounds wet. The main problem with this bike is that for all its aggressive lines and sharp angles, the bike was pure Honda. The power delivery was gentle, the exhaust note was non-existent, and it had a dual clutch transmission you could basically just twist and go. Between the shaft drive and its under-stressed engine, it's basically maintenance-free, which sounds good on paper. When there's nothing else exciting about the bike, at least having to clean the chain is something. If you're looking to get a cruiser motorcycle that will look cool, handle well, and not cost you $15,000, you could get the new Rebel 1100. It even has a DCT option if you don't want to use a clutch. Number 3, the Kawasaki Versus 650, the motorcycle equivalent of elevator music, so bland and generic that you don't even register it. A bike for good boys who don't want to bother anyone and want to ride to the office in their gray one-piece rain suit and Schuberth helmet. For when riding a motorcycle is too adventurous, the Versus 650 says, it's okay. I'm just a 2003 Honda Civic. This bike is fine. It's got Kawasaki's ye old 649cc parallel twin engine making just enough power to get you up to highway speed without making any noise, which is achieved by twisting a throttle. It has wheels which are attached to the motorcycle on axles, the front of which has a handlebar which the rider can alter the directions either left or right. The brakes slow the bike down and sometimes they can even stop the motorcycle, but only when you need to come to a complete stop. The saddlebags can contain between one and many things. If two humans need need to reach the same location at the same time, the motorcycle can convey them both safely to their shared destination. The plastic parts can come in colored or non-colored versions. If this sounds boring, just imagine this for 72 months or however long your loan is. Please, for the love of God, just buy any other adventure or touring bike, a KTM 790 Adventure, a V-Strom 650, or even a DRZ with a rally tank. The Versus 650 is for the scooter rider who wants to fly under the radar. They say motorcycle riders are invisible to car drivers, but on a Versus 650, you're invisible to just about everybody. I'm told the Versus 650 rides a lot like the Ducati Multistrada, and I'm pretty sure that's just Versus 650 owners exerting maximum levels of simping. And besides, if you watched my Ducati Multistrada review, that wouldn't do much for me anyways. There are dozens of comfortable, capable, and interesting touring motorcycles that are also affordable. The Versus 650 is not one of them. Number 2, it's the Honda CX500. The CX500 was first introduced in 1978 back when Honda had a drug problem, supported by the buckets of money that the CB750 was printing. It had a 497cc longitudinal V-twin putting down 50 horsepower and 34 foot-pounds of torque, weighing in at 480 pounds wet. The problem with the bike is that the designers didn't think about the combination of a longitudinal V-twin and a shaft drive which gave the bike a significant rightwards pull when you were decelerating. This was likely a result of the crankshaft's rotation combined with the rotation of the shaft, but regardless, if you're not experiencing it, it can catch you off guard. Not to mention a hit with a consistent problem with the brakes locking up or dragging, causing premature wear in the best case, and premature death in the worst. If you're looking for a cafe-style bike with a transverse V-twin, just get a Guzzi, they're the standard. But if you want a 70s Honda, you might as well get a CB750. There's a reason it's the go-to cafe racer bike to build on nowadays anyways. Number 1, and perhaps the worst motorcycle ever made in the history of the world, is the Hyundai GT650R. Look, I'm just gonna say it, Hyundai motorcycles are not that great. They're one step up from Chinese motorcycles you can buy on Amazon. The GT650R is the best 300 class beginner sport bike ever made. Obviously, I'm kidding, but this is another case where moto journos break out the forbidden words like functional or not great or get the job done. If you don't know, there's a myth going around that Hyundai's built Suzuki's motors for them for a while, which explains why it amounts to an SV650 motor in it. It's got a 647cc 90-degree V-twin putting down 76 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque, which sounds good on paper, but levers are vague and spongy, same goes for the suspension, and the build quality could best be described as when your dad tries to fix a roof because the contractor's too expensive. It looks like what someone who's never seen a Ducati Panigale thinks one might look like. If you want a V-twin sport bike, get an SV650. Once again, the answer to all questions is the SV650. Fact: in a 2004 episode of Sesame Street, Cookie Monster revealed that before he started eating cookies, his name was Sid. Goodbye.
Bummer for you, my little squid. This video is actually over, but lucky for you, there's plenty of other Yammie videos you can check out right over here. What's gonna happen to them? I don't know. I haven't seen them, but you can watch them right now.